All right, here is Hillary Clinton has a bit of a dilemma, and it's not. Let me make it clear. I think that if I were Bernie Sanders at this point, I would rather have Hillary Clinton's set of dilemmas than Bernie Sanders' set of dilemmas, just on sheer numbers. Okay, at this point. And the dilemma is that she is making the argument that she is more qualified to be president. She is making the argument that she has more experience that is suited for the presidency. And it's pretty hard to argue with that. I think look, she lived in the White House and was the closest confidant to a president for 8 years. She has served in another president's administration as Secretary of State. She has served in the U.S. Senate. She has been First Lady of a state and has seen the administration of that state. I mean, her firsthand experience of what it would take to be president is close to being unrivaled. George Herbert Walker Bush comes to mind as someone who also probably had similar experience as a vice president, as the head of the CIA, as a congressman, as the son of a senator, and as, a changeling or whatever. Shape-shifting, changing lizard.
Yes.
But the one problem with her argument that will not go away is that despite all the experience that she boasts, she has to explain away what many consider to be I think everyone considers to be a mistake on what many consider to be the greatest foreign policy blunder, and I think that understates it, of the modern era by this country, and that is Iraq. Here is her attempt to respond to that criticism, and in some ways it's somewhat effective, not necessarily in my mind, but I think it resonates with some people. This is number 5.
Your critics will say they see the Obama administration, of which you were, of course, a part as Secretary of State, as a period where now things are less stable around the world, certainly in the war on terror. Specifically, Senator Sanders earlier tonight said, yes, a lot of experience, but it doesn't always translate into the best judgment, and he cited your vote on the war in Iraq. How do you respond to those two criticisms?
Well, first of all, I have a much longer history than one vote, which I've said was a mistake because of the way that was done and how the Bush administration handled it. But I think the American public has seen me exercising judgment in a lot of other ways. And in fact, when that hard primary campaign was over and I went to work for President Obama and he ended up asking me to be Secretary of State, it was because he trusted my judgment. And we worked side by side over those 4 years. And think about where we were when he became president. As I just said, Iran on the way to a nuclear weapon, which would have destabilized the entire Middle East, created an arms race, the likes of which we have never seen. We had hundreds of thousands of American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Our best allies and friends in Europe and Asia were really put out with us because of the way they'd been treated by the Bush administration, and were very skeptical that the United States was a good ally any longer and wanted to lead the world toward peace, prosperity, and security. I spent so much of my time getting back the confidence and the trust of our friends and allies around the world. So I think we made a lot of progress. Now, do we have a terrorist threat? Yes, we had a terrorist threat on 9/11 before President Obama took office. Yes, we were attacked. So this is not something new. This is a long-term challenge. That's why I've laid out a plan to defeat ISIS and the radical jihadist terrorist networks that I think has the best chance of achieving that. There is no time in human history where everything is going well. And we now live in a very interconnected world where we know everything that is going on and where people look to the United States to help. So we have to be leading, and that means we've got to be smart about how we try to assert our power so that it is constructive, makes a difference, and does lead to greater peace and prosperity. But I am very proud of my record as Secretary of State and what we accomplished, not only on specific trouble spots, but advancing women's rights, advancing gay rights, advancing religious freedom, internet freedom, and so many of the other values that we hold dear.
So this is the benefit of being, and it gives you a sense of why the Clinton campaign signed off on this last-minute Democratic forum before Iowa. This was not scheduled, right? This just cropped up. And it gives you the sense of why they probably wouldn't have okayed a debate. Because this is the weakest, this is or I guess the sort of the big chink in the armor for her in terms of foreign policy and largely her experience, right? Because this is the 3 a.m. call theme. And on one hand, she sort of blames the Bush administration for doing stuff wrong, but neglects to mention that or just says, I made a mistake in giving them authorization to do all these things wrong. She says, I have been working to regain their trust for a thing in which she contributed to diminish our trust. Then she goes on to say that she's got a plan to defeat ISIS, a function of the Iraq war, that is distinct from, presumably, right, the Obama administration's, who she relies on to say that his trust in me exonerates me in some level from that mistake. And then she goes on to basically say, like, look, people look to us. She reiterates, I mean, if you break down what she's saying there, she's saying, I am still pretty ready to intervene in places around the world in a way that I clearly was when I voted for the Iraq war. And I mean, I presume Chris Cuomo understood what she was saying, but that may be giving him too much of the benefit of the doubt. He perceived his job to just basically tee them up and let them go.
Well, unless it was like Maoist or Stalinist.
Right.
Government controls every single facet of our lives, or you still won't have cameras in your bedroom.
Right.